Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the opportunity to present my contribution to this very stimulating conference. I am especially interested in the topic of this meeting, as I dedicated a few years of my musicological research to the phenomenon of derivative works in the 18th century musical culture, with the special focus on the territory of Polish Commonwealth. But today I would like to focus more on the cataloger point of view. So I understand cataloging as providing accurate and extensive description of the actual source I have in hand, including unambiguous identification of the work, if possible, of course. The data produced should be useful to all kinds of users, other catalogers, scholars, musicians, and also be reusable. As a RISM cataloger, I take care of the quality of metadata by using authority files whenever possible, recommended vocabulary, and sticking to the RISM guidelines. The title of my paper is a deliberate reference to the article from 1979 by Robert Falk under the title Parody and Contrafactum, a Terminology Clarification. What I find interesting is that people are still struggling with those two terms. To generalize, most English-speaking musicologists as well as RISM contributors call 18th century excerpt from multi-movement work with different text underlaid as contrafacta, whereas in German scholarship it's often referred as parody. As Falk presents in his text presented, it is well documented that this kind of practice, derivation, was called parody in the 18th century, as well as other derivation techniques, term contrafacta being used earlier and for very specific situation. And anyway, I'm not willing to go deeper into this topic. I just wanted to use it as a good example that we still need to agree on the common dictionary of derivation types, plus its synonyms, because they exist, as we saw, and use it consistently, as well as communicate it consistently to our users, who maybe not be early music borrowing specialists. So let's look closely on the terminology being widely used in RISM for derivative works, description, especially excerpt, arrangement, and contrafacta. I'm conscious in this selection, not mentioning insertions of pasticcios. I want to concentrate on the single prototype derivation, in other words, situations in which it's clear that derivation technique is very limited and almost mechanical, with the use of pre-existing material and minimum creativity on behalf of the arranger, or at some situations, copists adjusting pre-existing music for the given occasion, liturgical festival or some other event. So it's still a derivation and not a separate work. So we have three main derivation techniques, terms on the left, activities, that produces three types of work version. So as a result of excerpting, we have excerpt being an alteration of the formal integrity of multi-movement work, namely extraction of at least one movement and treating it as an individual piece of music. Then we have arrangement, that is being alteration of the scoring and or musical text of the work, so the musical content of the work. Then we have contrafacta as a result of retexting, so giving a new text. So it's being alteration of the lyrics of work, often resulting in significant changes of music purpose and style in historical meaning of the word style. So we change style from the theatrical into religious, for example. And the result of applying those techniques to musical works, in each case, create new expression of a given work. And those techniques were often combined with each other in early music culture, so we often have expression that comprises of an excerpt, arrangement, and contrafacta all in one piece of music. With the picture of a monstrous child from Krakow, I would like to show you that some phenomenon that were natural and common at some point in music history are now perceived by us today as weird, because we see at them from the modern perspective with the burden of a musical work concept that was practically absent before 19th century, as many scholars say. As a consequence, as we try to squeeze the very rich model of musical performance, transmission, the musical practice and reception history into the frame of marked bibliographical data format, sometimes not everything fits perfectly well into those mark fields, and we create a kind of monster. And moreover, we as catalogers know how to interpret this monster, and we are used to it. And we can explain why it looks like that, but I think that the majority of non-specialist users of RISM database often lacks the competence to interpret our records properly. That's why I'm talking to you about this today. So now I want to perform a quick review, a flyover RISM field affected in derivative work cataloging, in order to highlight the places where cataloger put information about the work, about the derivation type, and what possibilities we have to differentiate work from the expression that is, in this case, a derivative work. I'd like to draw your attention to the obvious fact that we have information on the various levels of FRBR hierarchy in RISM record thus far. So in one RISM bibliographical record, we mix data representing work, expression, and for unique objects like manuscript, of course, manifestation and item. With the introduction of work authority record, a whole new perspective for clearing this opens up. But is the work level in RISM actually for work or for work plus expression, as we heard yesterday in some discussion? And what do we do in this model with derivative works like those I'm talking about? So here we have with the fields about people and institutions, title and content description. I want to talk about the details. Here you may want to look at the field 240, subfield R. In the case of arrangement, enter the key of the original work. If the original key cannot be determined, enter the key of the source at hand. So this one, this is the citation from the guidelines. This could be easier now with the introduction of work level. We will see it in practice. Here, please take a look at the subject heading. We put all the keywords needed to for describing work, as well as all the keywords describing derivative work, so the expression, so to say. With work level, we can split it up for good, so put all the keywords that are to the work, that fits to the work to work record, and all the keywords that are describing this expression to the bibliographic record. And here the indexing of synonyms values in search engine would be very useful, as previously mentioned by Mr. Leisinger. Description summary is actually one of the fields in which you can explain in natural language the character of derivation, and I bet it's extremely helpful for users, but not obligatory and rarely used in case of derivatives. Here we reach some problem. Natural would be to leave the expression text details and shift all the work text incipit text details to proper work authority record, although in this case this incipit in which you put the text of the contrafact at the beginning and then in the square bracket the text of the original text from this movement, it's extremely useful. So it will be good to preserve the relation between the new and old text incipit in some way, maybe shift it somewhere or move, but yeah, it would be very beneficial to have it somewhere still. So here, again, we have fields in which we can explain natural language outside of controlled vocabulary, what's going on in the piece of music we are cataloging. But we should take care of the terms used in those fields too, as example of parody and contrafacta showed at the beginning. And so finally, we have fields that will generate redundancy of data if we duplicate it in both work record and every source record. So one of my many questions I will put today, so in order to avoid the redundancy of data, shall we move all the data about the work to the work authority file or not, or keep it in the source record and duplicate it in the work authority file? That's one of my concerns. So it's high time, for example, we can see a pretty good and standard record from my colleagues at Warsaw University Library. And what competent user will read in this record is that it describes a copy of an excerpt from opera Bellerofonte by Myśliweczek that was for the first time performed in 1767 in Napoli, and then it was turned into sacred song for a particular liturgical festival by underlaying two religious Latin texts. But what statistical end user will understand from this kind of presentation? That it is an opera and sacred song at the same time, sung in Latin and Italian, with a very peculiar lyrics, beginning with Alma Redemptoris, ending in Italian, and it was the Alma Redemptoris matter performed in teatro, and all of this invented by Myśliweczek sounds a bit weird. So as you can see, we have quite a complex strategy of cataloging derivative works, and with the use of a lot of various RISM/mark fields. And the mixture, it can't be decoded easily by a user that is not a specialist, that has no competences or experience in doing so. So we have the mixture of work level and expression level, and it can be very hermetic and even misleading for someone not participating in the process of cataloging or not knowing RISM guidelines, as you can see on this example. And I really hope that with the introduction of work level, we can rethink the way to describe derivative works, and that it opens whole new possibility of separating work and expression terms in general. I think that derivatives are excellent examples because in those works, in derivatives, work and expression description can even be contradictory. For example, the purpose of music, the prototype will have the secular purpose, the theatrical, and the contrafacta will have the religious purpose. And the fact that those terms are not differentiated in any way, so we have the genre just one after another with commas, and we don't know which of them is referring to the work, which of them is referring to the expression. So I think it's a really interesting issue on this example. So these are some issues I see. But at the end of this paper, I want to come with some more questions that answers, and I'd like to invite you for the discussion on this. And here are my questions. questions. So I'm pretty sure we need to revise cataloging guidelines, not only for the derivative works, but in general to make work authority file useful and more intuitive for users. What I would wish to see in the close future is a discussion on that topic in the RISM community, followed by some clearly communicated definitions of derivation types and techniques, maybe a bunch of use cases collected from RISM catalogers as well as from end users in order to evaluate what presentation strategy would it make more intuitive to browse, search, and read with understanding, read our RISM records with the understanding. To initiate the discussion, I'd like to articulate those questions. I won't read them, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.